Yeah, so I'm Andy, and my talk is going to be about designing with code. It's not necessarily going to be a workshop. It's just it's more anecdotal, kind of my career path through education, kind of like getting into the workforce and then starting active theory and how that's kind of developed over the years. So yeah, let's kick it off. So this is the only graph in my presentation. I'll blast through it, but this is it represents me. I'm kind of in that middle bit where I wanted to be a designer, I wanted to be a developer. People kept trying to take me into one or the other. There wasn't really a place for me in the career world. I started out as a designer. I didn't really like people developing what I designed. I went to a developer. I didn't really like the designs people were giving me, so I really wanted to be both, but that didn't really work. And so hopefully this kind of resonates with maybe some students who are going through some similar sort of identity crisis. I'm seeing a lot of sort of roles coming up these days. Interactive designer, creative developer, creative technologist, I don't really know what that means. Diviner, someone from my graduating class called themselves this. It's a terrible word, but I understood what they were getting at. You know, they wanted to be both. They wanted to represent themselves in both disciplines. They didn't want to be kind of pigeonholed into one or the other. And so this is the very first thing I ever graphic designed. This was in 2004. And I did this in MS Paint. I had no concept of typography, layout. I just creatively expressed myself through MS Paint. I had no idea what I was making. And it looks terrible. I'll get it off the screen as soon as possible. But you can kind of see what I was getting at. You know, there was some influences there. I've got like a silhouette of The Strokes, my favorite band at the time, on the right there. And then in the bottom right, you've got my MySpace layout. And MySpace was just a great way for me to express myself. And it was UX was terrible. There was a music player there that was hidden. You couldn't turn it off. Text was right aligned. The post was on the right. You know, you had to work out how to use my MySpace page. But it was a great way for me to learn how to creatively express myself through code and design. And it was kind of this mixture of the two worlds. And this is kind of where I started to work out. This is what I wanted to do. And then shortly after that, this is where I came across this website on FWA. This was a website for Leo Burnett, it's an agency in Chicago, but this website blew my mind. This website really kicked me into gear that this is what I wanted to make. I wanted to make creative, expressive art on the web. This website you could draw with a pen. It was zooming in and out. You know, it was crazy. This was at a time where I was looking at websites like MySpace, like big .com sites, and I didn't even know you could do this sort of stuff. And so that's when I realized this is what I want to do. And then I went into university with this goal in mind, this end goal that I wanted to create things like this. And it started out like learning how to do some sort of design. This is the first thing I did in Illustrator. It's for a fake product where it would zap you if you fell asleep. If your head started tilting, it would zap you and you'd sit back up. So it was a fake product, but I could kind of see what I was trying to get at. It was my first go at trying to create layout, spacing, really having a go at that sort of stuff. And then that's where I started to find things that I liked. You know, like as a designer, you start going down a path, learning things that make up you as a designer. And this is something that really inspired me, this work from a design agency in London called Nonformat. They do really great work. Definitely check out their stuff. They have a lot of really good books. But I found their style so bold and so graphic and so like just strong. And I really got inspired to do this sort of work. And I started taking on kind of like freelance gigs. And this is what I did for a friend for free. But you can kind of see that some inspiration was taking there. And Obviously, I went a bit crazy with the Photoshop layer effect. You know, there's glows on drop shadows, on gradients, on reflections. You know, I pretty much tried everything. But it's good to look at this stuff and kind of see how you're inspired to create this sort of stuff. Because so much in design is just you slowly get better. You don't come out being a great designer. It's a very slow progress to learning what you like and how to get good at stuff. And then going through university, this was my first creative coding project that I did. It was taking the game Tetris and kind of breaking that out into multiple components. One person would rotate the block with a giant steering wheel that I got from a bus station. One person would move the block left and right with these push panels that I got from a hardware store for like bathroom stall doors. And another person would drop it with it was like a sawn-off broomstick handle. And then I coded it all in processing, which is not really a program meant for gaming. It's kind of like a sketch program. And then linking all that up with an Arduino. But doing this sort of stuff, I realized this is what I love to do. This is what I want to do. I want to create things that look nice, that are technically complex, and kind of create an emotion and create some sort of like story arc there. And then, so I left university. And this is my first real job. This is what I was doing when I left university. I was doing sites like this. I got to design this. I got to develop this. This is a Sizzler.com website. I think you guys have Sizzler here, but I screen recorded this a week ago. This is still live, so you can still go to it. But this was my first go at creating like an expressive, creative website. The code is terrible. I believe all the JavaScript is in a scripts.js file, which is about 5,000 lines big. Really terrible jQuery selects. But I realized I really liked parts of this project, but I didn't want to do big .com sites. And so I left this job, along with other jobs, to kind of try to do more creative, expressive work. And that's when I created this portfolio site. This is an earlier version. It didn't actually look like this when it went live, but this is my first go at creating something that was a little bit more artistic and creative, where I took a 3GS example, I kind of hacked it up a little bit, and then I overlaid some graphics on top of it. It was my first go at creating something that expressed myself, and then I wanted to use this as a way to get out of the industry that I was in into something a little bit more creative. And that's when I submitted that site to awwwards, and this got picked up by a very talented developer called Michael Anthony. He found me, and then we talked for like 5 hours, and he sent me this website. And this website blew my mind at the time. This was done in all JavaScript and CSS. I hadn't seen anything like this. This was kind of at the pivotal point when Flash was on the way out, and people were trying to work out what's the next big thing, and this was it. This was it. It was creating very creative animated websites completely with JavaScript. He sent me all the code for it. It was crazy. This guy is super talented, and that's when I realized that this is what I want to do. This is what I want to come to the US and give up, like sell all my stuff, get married, move to the US for this sort of work. So this website was really pivotal in that moment. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, looking at it now, it could be relevant today. And that's when we started Active Theory. This was a very bright day in Venice. I photoshopped myself in there because no one else could take the photo, so I'm not too sure if you can tell. Maybe my Photoshop skills are all right, but we still use this to this day. This was taken in 2012. This was a couple of months after we started Active Theory. But that's my two amazing business partners there, with Michael in the middle and Nick on the right. And the first project that we did was Clouds of Akiba. Clouds of Akiba was a project that we did with a very talented director, Ben Tricklebank. But this was a project that we did starting out of Active Theory, and we just went nuts with. This is a project like when you put it all on the line and you just want to do absolutely everything you can. We just went crazy with absolutely all of this stuff. The design kind of got given to us, but we animated everything we possibly could. We just kept staring at this website, animating every little element. And one thing that you'll kind of notice in a lot of our work is we record using a camera, playing with the website. We don't take screen recordings because we want to make sure that this is the actual product. It's not an After Effects comp. This is how you actually play with it. So if you kind of go through our work, you'll be able to see that we want to represent the work that we create, how it actually gets built. You know, that's the final product. It's not a comp. It's not a render. It's how it actually gets built. That's the thing that matters. And this was the start of it. This is the first time we ever did that, and this has kind of been the way that we present our work forward. And this is our very first office where we're coding Clouds of Cuba. We're sitting there on $10 IKEA desks. This is in the attic of an architect, paying very little rent. But it was a lot of fun. You know, it's super scrappy, but you need to kind of start in a really small way and build up from that. And then in 2013, we kind of got our big break doing Racer. And Racer kind of came off the back of Creative Lab kind of not necessarily knowing how to do a prototype. We had done some socket connections using Clouds of Cuba to get this project. And then Racer was very much an iteration of a prototype, like making it kind of like adding on features, getting it to the point where it got to where it kind of looked like this. But it was very much, a lot of the design was done in code. Just because this is our first go at developing for really low-powered Android devices. A lot of the CSS animations wouldn't work. We had to use SVG some places, Canvas some places, CSS some places. Now it's a lot better, but back then, Android for the web was not great. It was in a pretty bad place, and so just getting things to even like touch the screen and animate, you had to kind of like know how to really work the browser there. And that kind of translated into an installation component where like the tracks were embedded in this big table, and it was socket connections at the top, and that's kind of us a little bit delirious after all the projects. And then on the right, we went a little bit crazy with one of the tracks and had people kind of crashing into each other and stuff like that. And then jump forward a couple of years. This is when I started concepting on paper planes. This is one of the first designs that I did for paper planes. And this came off the back of what else could we do that connected multiple screens together. And something really simple was just kind of like just holding your phone like a paper plane and throwing it into another screen. And so this is one of the earlier comps. And this is the only comps I ever did for paper planes. Paper planes didn't really exist in design world. Afterwards, we kind of it just got straight into development, and this is kind of what it ended up as. Very playful. We've added things like a net. A lot of the UX we kind of just worked out, like how do we reduce the amount of UI. This project got realized with a very talented developer, Nathan Gordon, who's sitting there. But this project was very close to my heart, and it was great to see it come to life because it was such a slow, iterative process to the point where you could finally release it. And this got released on the biggest stage ever at Google I/O. This was the launch date for paper planes, and it was amazing. You know, seeing thousands of people interacting at the same time with a mobile phone, throwing into a giant Chrome browser. You know, it's such a pivotal point for the web and for my career to create something that multiple people can connect with. And this is the sort of stuff that I've always wanted to do. You know, this is the moment which really meant a lot to me. And I put this slide in because back the previous slide where you saw the stadium, I was there late at night, like a couple of days before the installation launched, tweaking this globe to make it look better. And so much of the sort of work that we do, and that's kind of what this talk is about, it's about iteration. When you kind of look at these two things side by side, you're like, oh, okay, one is definitely better than the other. But when you go down a path of trying to make something better, it's very small increments. It doesn't actually look that much different every time you add a little layer. You're like, oh, maybe we should make this gradient slightly tweak, or maybe we should make this drop shadow purple instead of black. Maybe we should add these reflections. All these little layers kind of like add onto this final product, but as you're doing it, it's really hard to see that. And so it's one thing that I'd like to get across is that you need to be able to trust yourself in your judgment. So much about design is opinion and subjective opinion, so you need to be able to go, no, this is actually better, I'm headed in the right direction. And sometimes it's not, and you go backwards, but it's very small increments. And that's true about all of our work. All of the work that I do is so much of these little milestones that you get through. It starts out as something kind of ugly, you may not like it, but then it's little tweaks to get to the point where you're happy with it. And so this project was done for Hennessy, and sorry, just one second. But this project couldn't really be designed in the sense that a lot of the data, because it was taking LiDAR scans from the actual vineyards, a lot of the comps were just kind of like look and feel comps. And I do a lot of those sort of comps for a lot of our projects, but this one even more so. It was very abstract. This was the first round of design that I did for this, which doesn't look anything like it did. But it was about trying to represent the process of creating cognac through this chaotic process, and then each chapter was a representative aspect of that process. So vineyards, it was just kind of like, all right, just find these crazy vines and slap the word vineyards over the top. But it was trying to represent a feeling or an emotion, not so much like this is actually what it's going to look like, but this is the feeling that it's trying to portray. And the next round of comps got a little bit closer to creating something a little bit more photorealistic. You're like, all right, so we have fire to represent the distillery process. How do we represent fire? Like, let's add some smoke, let's add some particles, some red particles. How do you taste oak? You're like, well, let's take a silhouette and put some oak images and that stuff. So we kind of like knew what we needed to shoot and how we needed to build this stuff, but the design was very much look and feel. And this is all the equipment that we used to record it. In the top left, you've got this LiDAR scanner. This is a $200,000 piece of equipment that shoots out all these little laser beams over the course of 2 minutes to produce this 200 million point LiDAR image. It's so complex, it's so highly detailed. If you scan out, it just looks like a 3D model. And then on the right, you've got like a pretty expensive red camera with a Kinect on top, and then you've got another LiDAR scanner that was used to scan objects, and then you've got sound guys that were actually recording sounds as we were kind of going around, tapping on wood, dropping nails, stuff like that. And so this project was very much taking the LiDAR data and creating something that could be played with. And when I say this couldn't be really comped, it's like you couldn't really take this into cinema and be like, no, this is what it's going to look like. So much in WebGL, it doesn't really appear the way it's going to appear in another program. You need to see it in WebGL and make decisions based on that. So taking a 200 million 200 million point LiDAR data and reducing it to 200,000, you kind of have to make these creative decisions. You're like, for this particular scene, you had to remove the roof, had to remove the walls. You had to selectively remove points. I did it based on distance, and then that was too precise, so I had to do it randomly. So it was a lot of iteration to get it to the point which made it felt nice. And so much about this project was just iteration. It was just night after night, just tweaking and tweaking and tweaking until you got it to somewhere where you were happy with it. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, this sort of project is what I love to do, where it really is just this creative process through making something from scratch, not really knowing how it's going to turn out, but trusting in the process and trusting in your own opinion. And then this is the last project that I'll show you. But this was more of a personal project where I really needed to get more into WebGL. I wanted to learn more about shader code. This particular site, definitely check it out. I didn't really design this at all. This was done through iteration, and I was like, each different song was trying to represent an emotion or a feeling, and then you kind of take that as a concept, and then you build around that. So I'll just take one example. So the very first one, I just asked the artist, who I worked pretty closely with, I was like, what does this mean to you? What does this mean? And he just said it was about like being thrown around, having no control. And I was like, all right, no control, falling. What about you like going through a tunnel? And then I kind of landed on this concept where you kind of like didn't really have any control over it, and you're kind of floating through this to create something which felt like you were kind of like moving through space. And getting to this final image was just iteration. You know, you start out with two cones that move into each other. You add some noise so it kind of pulsates. You add this little worm guy that was like 50 concentric circles that kind of lurk to each other. But so much of this is just creating something, not really knowing what the end product is, but you're really holding on to an emotion or a feeling. And that's all I'm going to talk to about projects, but this is the question that I always ask myself, and it might seem obvious from a macro level. Obviously, you want your projects to be better, but this is a question that I'm always asking myself on a micro level. As you kind of go through it might seem daunting, but you can always make little things, little tweaks, and that's the easy stuff. Like you're like, would this be better if this icon animated? Would it be better if this UX was slightly different? Would it be better if this color was blue instead of green? All these subjective opinions is how you make things that get to the sort of level that we make. It's just iteration after iteration after iteration. So next time, if you're kind of working and you kind of get stuck, focus on something small, something really small that you can tweak and make better. And sometimes the answer sucks. Sometimes the answer means you have to refactor an entire thing in order to make it better, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it, because this is the endless pursuit of perfection, getting to that point where you can't ask yourself this question anymore. Where you've done everything you possibly can, and then that's when you release it. And that's how you make great work. It's this iteration, because next time you do a project, you'll be able to take that knowledge and make it even better. And so every project that we've done through Active Theory is this really slow progression through our own individual style, myself and Michael and people that work with us, making work that makes us happy, making work that subjectively, in our mind, is perfect. And then this is my last slide. Oops, sorry. This is my last slide. This is something that I started a year or two ago, but I found it really important. I didn't really know what I was doing at the time, but as I kind of just exist on the internet, I find things that I like and I slap it on this Tumblr. And I can honestly say that I like this stuff. Like, this represents who I am as a designer. I can go to this and I can be like, okay, this is things that I like. This is my own individual taste, my own individual style. I can come to this if I feel stuck. It's my own little place where I know that I like certain things, and then you can kind of use this sort of reference. So I recommend keeping track of, if you're a designer, keeping track of things that you like, because it's really interesting. You go back a year or two, and you'll find things, and you'll find influences of the work that you create from this sort of inspirational material. Thank you.